talking about my opening remarks, there's this is really where the major pain point is right now from what I'm seeing with IT. And so certainly when we talk about infrastructure, though, it's a very broad term. So given iPass and AT&T is a huge organization. I mean, Vishy, you play a very specific role within the industry mobile solutions, and OGIS Mobile Iron just came out of stealth mode 2 years ago now. So maybe we could each introduce ourselves, what our companies do in the respective ecosystem of infrastructure, and then how we define infrastructure in terms of cloud or on-premise or off-premise.
Great. So my name is Ogis Rege. I'm responsible for the product team at Mobile Iron, and we are a device and application management and security platform. We sell to IT, primarily IT teams that have a wide swath of new devices, smartphones and tablets coming in, and are wrestling with how to manage them and secure them and actually get some value out of them through apps as well.
I'm Barbara Nelson, Chief Technology Officer for iPass. And what iPass does is provide an enterprise mobility solution for enterprises large and small as their users are traveling, as their users are connecting to the internet all over the world on whatever platform they happen to be on, originally on the laptops and now moving more towards the smartphones and the pads.
My name is Vishy Gopalakrishnan. I'm part of a team at AT&T that works with enterprise customers. And my team specifically focuses on mobile application platforms. How do you develop cross-platform apps? Second part of my portfolio is around device management, so working with folks like Mobile Iron on helping organizations get the visibility and control they need around their mobile assets. And a third part of my portfolio is around location-based services. So how do you inject location as a vector to make your apps that much richer and that much more engaging?
Barbara, how do we define infrastructure in terms of what's the right mix of, what are the shifts that we're seeing between, in a different era, really owning all of it, and versus the upcoming era where it's possible to outsource all of it? Where's the middle ground?
Right, it's a great question. You really can't define infrastructure anymore. That's the real challenge about it is it's no longer something that IT can put a box around and say, this is my infrastructure, this is what I manage, this is what I own, this is what I control. You can try, but that's a short-lived exercise in futility, because what happens is your users, your employees, don't stay inside the box you put them in. They're now trying to get access to services where they happen to be all over the world. Not all the applications are under your control. They're out in the cloud. There's a mix of personal apps, commercial apps, enterprise sanctioned apps, enterprise not sanctioned apps. And so really trying to kind of bound that infrastructure is no longer an easy job for IT. And it's something they have to try very hard to understand what level of control do they have and how they can enable their users to be effective and be productive wherever they happen to be.
Mm-hmm. Vishy, what are you seeing?
I'd have to agree with Barbara. I don't think there's much I can add, right? I mean, the phrase that comes to mind is, I remember a friend of mine way back had used this phrase he called it the virtual demarc, right? So for those of you with some kind of telecom or communications background, remember, there used to be the CPE and there's the demarc where the telco gets into your facility. And today, trying to draw a hard and fast line on what constitutes what's inside infrastructure, what's outside infrastructure, is it's not worthwhile, right? So you need to figure out whatever constitutes infrastructure. Do I have the appropriate tools, right? So I have the visibility and control, right? So all the infrastructure that you have as an enterprise to get visibility into your desktops, your laptops, your transport, your connectivity infrastructure, et cetera. Can I replicate that to the extent feasible with my mobile assets? I think that's the more important question, as opposed to trying to get into the nits and gnats of what constitutes infrastructure versus what is not.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing is there's two kinds of infrastructure. There's the technology infrastructure, but the piece that I think most organizations are not that evolved on yet is the organizational infrastructure to support it. So if you think about what's happened now, there's a big set of my assets that are no longer owned by me as an organization. There's a set of existing technology that I need to plug into, but what about my policies? Who's going to manage this? Which organization is it going to sit in? That to me is organizational infrastructure. And one of the real moves that we've seen over the course of the last year is that in many organizations, there's a new profession, in essence, starting, right, which is mobile IT. And it has a different set of skills. It has a different mindset. It has a different set of challenges than traditional IT and traditional security teams have had to work with. So organizations, I think, are just now, as we enter 2011, starting to think about who should run it, what does that actually mean, and what are the skills and capabilities and policy infrastructure I need to be able to support it.
So if you have this kind of hybrid infrastructure you're talking about, that's technology and organizational, and say that, they're bringing in their own devices or their own platform, if you will. And I mean, what's organizationally is how do you kind of manage that insurgency, if you will, or this this kind of hybrid development.
Sure. One way to think about it, I think, is think about the role that IT has had many times in the past, and it's been a very governing role, right? I tell you what to do, and then you do it. But I've got a 13-year-old kid. How many people here have teenagers? Yeah, they don't do what you tell them to do, and if they know you're going to say no, they just won't ask you, right? If Scream 4 comes out and it's rated R and he wants to go see it, he's not going to ask me if he knows I'm going to say no. And so what's happened now, I think, on the IT side, is you have a set of users that are, first of all, more technically savvy than they've been in the past, have access to technology that they haven't had in the past, and the system hookups that they have to get things like email are much more straightforward. And so there's a mindset shift that you end up needing to have within IT, which is a mindset that goes from saying, I'm actually in control of this, to actually I'm providing a service to my end users. And if I don't do that effectively, if I'm not providing value that an end user actually sees as helping them do their job, then they're just going to bypass me. And I think that's a struggle that many IT organizations are still wrestling with. What is their role, and how do they make sure that they don't end up becoming irrelevant in a situation where most of the technology decisions are made by the person at the endpoint?
And I think to Ojas's point, I think it's especially critical given what's happened to IT over the last 2 or 3 years, right? So IT budgets in general, right, with the economic downturn, either flat or declining in most organizations, right? So from a supply and demand perspective, the budgets are flatlining or going down. But just from a mobility and consumerization of IT perspective, the expectation in terms of the kind of service, the freedom that I want to use the tools that I want, right, that is just rising. And so if you're an enterprise IT, you could look at it as, oh my God, the sky's falling. Or if you're a progressive and a mature kind of CIO or an IT leader, you can look at this as an opportunity to completely redefine how IT works with the rest of the organization. Because, I mean, let's face it, for the longest time, IT was the department of saying no, right? Or yes, but that's item number 25 on my list. I can only get to 20 this year, right?